Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the PASS Summit. I'm Steve Jones, and I'm talking about branding yourself here. Hopefully that's what you came to see. If not, please feel free to leave. That's all right. I have this slide up here, not really to promote myself so much, but to just give you an idea that these are all part of my brand. You know, I run SQL Server Central. I'm the editor there. I started Database Weekly about 9 years ago. I work for Redgate Software. I wish I ran Redgate Software, but I work for Redgate Software. They bought SQL Server Central a few years ago, and I also own a company called SQL Share that does a lot of training. We have a training center in Florida. We do a lot of video training as well, and those really are all part of my brand. They're part of the different ways that people know who I am, and a lot of times when I talk to people about jobs or consulting or anything else, it's often because of one of these things that they know me, and that's been very valuable to me in my career over the last couple decades. So I've got an agenda here. I assume you guys can all read slides. I'm not going to read them, but I'm kind of just going to go through here how you build a brand, why you build a brand, and then some different practical tips that you can use to actually get good at this stuff and make yourself a little more visible. So I'm going to start with this kind of economic theory. Has anybody heard of the long tail out here? A few people. What this really says is that for anything that we have in the world, any type of product, any kind of service, anything at all, we have popularity here on the y-axis, which is, things get more popular as it goes up. And then we have all the different products we have down along the side, or it could be services or anything else. Now, for any product, it's going to fall somewhere in this curve. And you can see there's very, very few products at the head of the tail that are way over to the left side that are very, very popular. It may be low demand, but there's always some marketplace. And to a large extent, this is how Amazon has got huge, is by serving the tail here, by making all these things that don't have a huge demand available. So, as an example, those of you that are probably my age probably remember these things. We had record stores a long time ago. We used to go get music. These are very, very hard to find now. This one's actually in Seattle. But you used to go in here, and in the front of the store, you'd have the very popular stuff, the stuff at the head of the tail. Stuff like Bruce Springsteen, back when I was a kid, or U2, or I don't even know, Justin Bieber now, I don't know. But there was always someplace in the back of the store, though, where you would find things like the imports or the alternatives, these very, very low demand items, but there's still a little bit of a demand for them. They're always there. They're sometimes hard to find, though. Now, if we change this around a little bit, and let's say we're looking for our services that as workers, as employees, we should consider ourselves, as selling a product, selling our skills. We have this desire here, and then we have all of us on the bottom, the x-axis. My buddy Paul Randall here is way up at the head of the tail, right? If he wants my job, I'd probably get fired tomorrow, or most of us probably get fired if he decides he wants our job. He's very, very talented. He's very, very well known, very popular. My friend Brent Ozar from Chicago is probably kind of in the middle. I'm sure a lot of you know who Brent is as well. Maybe not quite as in demand as Paul, but very, very popular as well. However, the rest of us are on this curve. We're on the same curve with these gentlemen, and we all have some demand. And the idea here is that as you brand yourself, you market yourself a little better, you move slightly up the curve. You become a little more well-known. It's a little more likely that you'll get a job interview, a little more likely that you'll get that next job, or that somebody will want to hire you and maybe offer you something out of the blue. The whole idea here is that we want to move slightly up the curve. You don't have to become as popular as any of these gentlemen, but becoming a little more popular makes a huge difference, especially in these days when most of the HR people or recruiters I talk to often get 100 or more resumes for every position. So being able to stand out a little bit more makes a huge difference. Or being from Colorado, I live out in a ranch, in an agriculture community. We want to separate the wheat from the chaff, right, in general, by making ourselves look more like we're the wheat. We want to stand out in the crowd. We want to become much, much more visible. Oh, and that should be red. I got horrible colors here. Pretend that's red. All right. Now, humility is very good. It's a very good quality in people, but it's not good when you're looking for a job, or when you're trying to get a promotion, you're trying to get a raise, you're trying to advance your career. That's the point when you have to stand out, and a lot of the things I talked about, I know people struggle with, and I completely understand that. For a long time, I didn't want to stand out apart from anybody else too much, but as you look for jobs and as you try to compete with everybody else, it is important that you do stand out a little bit, and you put your humility to the side when you're in that position where you have to look for another job. So a word of caution. I always start this with some cautions first, and there's a number of reasons that I'm going to talk about here. There's a survey Computer World does every other year, and they've been doing it, I think, 4 times now, so past 8 years. And what they found is that so many employees are actually being researched before they get hired or before they get offered a job interview. HR people are starting to Google you or look at your Facebook, look at your tweets, look at your blog. They're just trying to find out information they can to try to decide if it's even worth their time to call you. What they're saying is a good number, up to 1/3, and this survey is a couple years old, but up to 1/3 of people are rejected because of something found online. If you think about 1/3, that's one of the people next to you on either side of you doesn't even get called for an interview because of something found online. It's a pretty powerful message, and it means you have to be careful about what you post, what you expose about yourself, what you put out there. Very, very recently, the FTC actually started to allow companies to not only run background checks, but to include social media information in those checks and actually keep that information around. I don't know if any of you have children, teenagers. In the U.S., at least, when a lot of teenagers apply for jobs now, they apply online or they apply in some kiosk at the front of the store. A lot of those kiosks are, in fact, linked. So if you go to work at Target and you get fired, and then you go to apply at Barnes & Noble, Barnes & Noble will be well aware that you worked at Target and you got fired. And that information is available to them. And the same thing is starting to happen in our industry as well, especially as so many people have a large digital presence. Companies are starting to pay attention to this, and they're starting to look and see whether or not they want to actually call you, they want to hire you, or are you going to cause problems? Are you not going to be a good employee? Are you somebody that's going to get a new job every 8 months because you just get bored or you don't get along with people? Yes, sir.
Yes, Steve, a question about the previous slide. The dangers of working for loss, etc. I think we all agree to that. But my question is, do you think there is a certain amount of tweeting that can be dangerous? I can imagine, I don't know if it's the case, I can imagine if you have 500 tweets a day, that the hiring person will think he doesn't have any time to do real work anymore.
Okay, I have Hugo here. He's the smartest guy in Holland. If you ever have any SQL Server questions, ask him. But his question is the amount of tweeting or Facebook or posting or whatever a problem? And I'm actually going to talk about that in a minute. But it definitely can be a problem. And it's not that you can't post things, you shouldn't post things, but you want to be aware of what it is that you post. Yes?
How about on the other hand, if they can't find anything on you, is that a negative or should not be visible at all?
So the question is that a negative if they can't find anything on you? It potentially can be a negative, but it's a relative negative. So if I find, for example, when I went to get my last job before this one, there was I have a large presence somebody knew about. And when I talked to the HR person, because I was curious, because I didn't meet a few of the requirements that they had listed, why did they call me? And they specifically said, we called you because we found this huge amount of stuff you had done in terms of writing articles and answering questions, and it appeared that you had knowledge. They also said that compared to other people, they just didn't find any information, and they had a better chance. They thought they had a better chance of being a good employee with me. So it's all relative. If your competition in your area at that particular time has a larger presence, it allows companies to perform some due diligence, and they may not call you because they have better candidates, not because you haven't posted anything. Does that make sense? So it's not so much a negative, but it doesn't allow you to stand out at all. I totally understand if you don't want to post things publicly, and I have some ideas of ways you can get around that as well. So, all right. So here I kind of tackle some of what Hugo said. Most of these examples are from Facebook because Facebook is just, it's huge, right? It's out there, and it tends to generate press when things like this happen. But I have all these different clippings of people that have gotten into trouble. And there's specifically one here, how Facebook got me fired because somebody had posted, in the article itself, you read it, the guy was posting like 200 times a day, and his boss eventually said, well, apparently you're not working very much because you're posting on Facebook, every 10 minutes. The interesting one for me on here is this one. A few years ago, Brian Dawkins left the Philadelphia Eagles in American football, and there was a lot of controversy. He was a very popular player in Philadelphia. He was a very talented player, but he was getting a little older. So he came to Denver. Good for Denver, bad for Eagles. It's all right, I don't care. Good for Denver. The day that he came to Denver and signed, a guy posted a message from the Eagles that he thought that it was handled very, very poorly, that the Eagles really hadn't made an effort to retain Brian Dawkins. This guy worked in the Veterans Stadium. He actually worked on the grounds crew. He's one of those guys that maintained the turf there, lined the field, that kind of stuff. And they fired him because of what he posted, because he was a representative of that company. It's happened many times. I've got a few examples as well. Does anybody remember Mark Jen? You know Mark Jen? Worked for Microsoft for years. And then Google recruited him. They spent weeks and weeks or months recruiting Mark. He went over to Google. He worked there, I believe, 7 days. And he started a blog his first week there. Now, this was back in 2004, 2005 timeframe. Google was very, very concerned about their image. They were very secretive about what they put out there. And Mark didn't write anything strange or weird. I mean, he started to talk about all the free food and some of the perks they had, you know, the advantages of working at Google there. And his boss, they just got upset at his blog, even though it did not disclose any financials, did not disclose any trade secrets, any algorithms, anything to do with PageRank, and they fired him. They'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars recruiting this guy, and they fired him. The one on the right here, guy at Microsoft, over here in Redmond, not too far away, worked in the copy shop, actually, on campus. He posted this picture. And he was fired, and he was escorted off of the campus for posting this picture. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really see anything that's that too bad here. There's nothing that says Microsoft. There's nothing that tells you where this is. There's nothing to say that this was even, taking place on campus. But somebody at Microsoft overreacted because of the Apple computers that are sitting on the dock. And this guy's blog, I guess, mentioned that he worked at Microsoft, and they fired him. Perhaps a little bit extreme, but it can happen. I worked at J.D. Edwards, and we had a guy that was fired for cause for disclosing financial information literally about 10 minutes before it was released on the quarterly phone call. But, he posted something on a message board that said, we'd had a good quarter and we'd exceeded expectations, and they literally came up, packed him up, walked him out the door, 2 security guys. Got to be careful what you post. You got to be smart. I have a clip here from a legal document from a law professor that looks at some of the changes in law as we've moved to the digital world. And kind of the summary there is that courts generally don't find that you have any privacy interest in anything you post on the internet or anything somebody else posts about you. In general, when it goes out there, it's very, very difficult to have a legal basis to actually have something removed. So you want to be aware of what you post. And if you guys remember this guy, back when he had that hair, I had hair like that actually. Now we both kind of look like this. But he sold cameras under the moniker Images Everything. It's not everything, but it does matter. It is very, very important. And your brand is your image. It's your reputation. And it's very important that you pay attention to what it is. You can have whatever brand you want, but just be aware of what it is, better or for worse. All right, any questions? You guys doing all right? Feel free to ask questions. Don't just sit there. Yes, sir.
I'm on Facebook, but I use another name. People still figure out does that protect my Gmail under a different name also?
So the question is, he's on Facebook, but under a different name, and Gmail is a different name, so separate from the way you go to work and it's on your business card or whatever. I'll actually talk about that a little bit. It actually is a good idea to keep those separate, to have a little bit of a separation there. And you can, to some extent, I hate to say spin, but you can explain away the fact that I do post things on Facebook that are part of my personal life that are different than what I do at work. And keeping those separate is actually a great idea. Yes, sir.
I was reading that there's a new technology out where if you have a photograph on that they can actually cross-reference your photograph. They use the facial recognition.
We're all data people, right? That's coming.
That's what I'm saying. So you might think it's funny, so they put a picture there too.
Right, right. Well, I mean, we saw the semantic search here just an hour ago. We're going to have image search at some point in SQL Server. Bet on it. All right. This is my wife. I live out in Colorado. Those of you who don't know me, I live on a ranch, and my wife trains horses. Now, she told me this story about how she trains horses, and I thought it was very applicable to here, and so I kind of took it with her permission. She's all right with it. When she goes to train horses, horses are big animals, right? They're 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds. They're large animals, but they're very, very skittish. They're not very brave animals. They're prey animals, not predators. As a result, as you study horses and as she has kind of studied psychology and understanding how to work with them, she says that the horse's mind is really like a jar, right? They have a great memory. They actually remember a lot of stuff across years. she says that shouldn't be the elephant has long memory, it's the horse. I don't know. I don't really like horses, but I put up with it. I love my wife. So she tells me when she goes out there, she makes a huge effort all the time to not scare the animal, not startle the animal. She wants to build confidence. She wants to work with the horse and develop this bond. And when she goes out there and has a good day, she hasn't scared the horse, she says what she's had is a good experience, and that's a white marble. And that white marble goes in the jar. And that becomes part of her bond with the horse. And over time, she continues to work with the horses, and she always tries to build more white marbles every day. There's times that she stops early, and she planned on spending 2 hours doing something. She stops after an hour and a half because she's had a good day. She wants to retain that white marble. Now, it's not always like that. There are times when things don't go as well as you expect. When you do something or something happens externally, horses are very skittish, wind, bags blown across the property, anything that happens actually does what she calls a black marble. She creates a black marble, and that is a bad experience. 2 years ago, I was coming home from this conference. My wife was riding this horse, and as I drove from the airport in Denver to my house, I got a phone call, and it said, "Don't go home, go to the hospital." Because this horse threw her off, broke her arm, and of course my sister-in-law was there, luckily. My sister-in-law tells me, she's more worried about the horse because she had a really bad experience there. And it's not so much for her, but it became a problem with the horse trusting her then. She had a black marble. Now, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have black marbles. We're all going to do things wrong over time. The problem is, when we build this brand, when we build this reputation, we don't want it to look like this. We want to make sure that our impression is going to look like this. It's going to have mistakes and black marbles. It's going to have problems in it. But we want it to be mostly good impression. And that's the thing you really have to emphasize when you're trying to build a brand that projects out to people. I've made plenty of mistakes. I continue to make mistakes on a regular basis. I assume the rest of you guys do as well. But you want to do more good things than bad things. And you want to make sure that you publicize your good things more than your bad things. You don't have to hide from them. Be aware of them. But you want to press them on. All right. So now, kind of the what to watch out for, what to be careful of, why. Let's talk about how you actually kind of stand out in the world. You have all these things you could do. We'll talk about each one of them. The thing I want to make sure you understand is that these can kind of be internal or external. And by that I mean they could be within your company or within your life, and they don't have to be on the public internet. Or they could be. You could publish a blog or write articles or books or anything else. Just remember that you can do either one. And anything that I say, keep that in mind, that you can build this brand a little bit privately if you want, and only pull it out at those times when you need it to get a job, to get an interview, or something else. All right, so resumes. How many people are from Europe, just out of curiosity? You. One. Okay. All right, you're the only guy. You're the token. CVs in Europe are a little more popular than they are here. Curriculum vitae, it's all your work history, right? Hugo, you have lots of stuff on your CV, right? Okay. In the U.S., as I talk to people, I talk to a lot of recruiters and HR people, they pretty much seem to be evenly split, whether it's 1 or 2 pages. They all say no more than 2 pages. And the reason is when you put a job out there or you ask for applications, typically you are getting dozens, hundreds, or more applications, and you just don't have time. So for the most part, people spend about 30 seconds looking over it to say, is it interesting to me or not interesting to me right now? And it either goes in the round file or it goes into the let's look at it again file. As somebody that's hired, who hires people out of curiosity here? Do you guys spend much more time than that when you look at resumes? You don't have time, right? In all honesty, when I hire people, I typically look at about 50 resumes. I just don't have time.
Most of the resumes that I get are like 10 pages.
Right. And I don't look at those. I look at, so the early bird gets the worm, whoever's first. The first 50 or so resumes I look at, and I try to find 10 people out of there that I can call and talk to, and then call that down to interviews. So it becomes important to actually apply early if you need a job. But keep your resume short and keep it interesting. One of the things that people tend to do is put a lot of keywords in this business, right? We all put Java and C++ and .NET and SQL and HTML and Perl and Ruby and everything else you can put on there. And that's fine. That's good stuff to put in there because it is important. But it's not really important for the person that's going to spend 30 seconds looking at your resume. because you're going to be qualified or not qualified. Usually they'll have searched already to say, I need somebody that does X. And then your keywords are important there, but they're not something you want to read. You want something up there at front that's going to grab somebody's eye to make them think, I'm a good fit for this position. That's why I say make this human readable. Look at the resume from a distance. Get your wife, your husband, your brother, your sister, your mom to look at it and go, does it just kind of look like it's going to get some attention from somebody? Don't pack it full of words. Don't make it look like a newspaper that's just got so much information on there they can't absorb that information in their 30 seconds. And then include links. Give people a way to go find more information about you. This is kind of where, if you've got that Facebook profile, you might not have it on there, but maybe you have a blog or maybe you have something else. Maybe you're in the forums and you answer a lot of questions. You want to include that kind of profile information on there. Give them a link to do things. Don't be funny, though. Don't try to be funny. Most of us aren't funny. We're just not. I'm not that funny. And for those of you who looked at resumes, every once in a while you see stuff that's just, somebody's trying to be funny, but it's weird. And it just makes you wonder, am I going to get somebody that's so far away from what I want, or that's going to be so different that it's not going to be a good fit? I've got a link here. You can go check out some of those. Weirdest thing I ever saw is I was reading down the resume, and I got to the bottom of the first page, and the guy had hobbies, cooks exotic meat. And for a programming position or a developer position. And I wanted to meet the guy because I was really curious what exotic meats were, but it really turned me off and made me think that this is just going to be a very strange individual because it's not appropriate for a professional resume. You do whatever you want in your private life. It's your life. It's not appropriate at work, though. Include contact information, obviously. Cover letters, these are a good first impression. These days it becomes harder and harder sometimes to figure out who you're actually applying to. A lot of postings on Monster and Dice are, in fact, reposts from a recruiter of some sort or a headhunter. But if you can do this, it makes a huge difference. If you can actually find out who's hiring or say something about the company, it becomes a big deal, especially if it's the place you want to work. We all have different interests. We all have different reasons for wanting to work at a company or not work at a company. It becomes a big deal. This is extremely important if somebody recommends you, or you hear about a job that's not posted, something that's private. Being able to write that cover letter, find out who the hiring manager is, and actually write them a letter. Write them a letter that makes them think you're worth talking to. There's plenty of places that tell you how to write one. I'm not going to do that. There's a good link here that says how not to write one, which is probably most important. Yes, sir?
So what do you do when you can't find out who the hiring manager is? And I've tried LinkedIn and all these other things. Find that.
Write a better resume. If you can't find a hiring manager, write a better resume. You got to understand, think about it, stop for a minute and think about this is a blind position and try to write something, not necessarily a cover letter, though they're not bad, but write something that makes sense, that means something. If you're going to come work at Microsoft, try to tell them why you think Microsoft's a good company or why you think you're a good fit there. Give them a good reason to call you. Yes, sir?
Just a quick example of how to customize for each company. I recently got a resume for a DBA job. First paragraph says I'm applying for your DBA job. Second paragraph says, and I want to use my networking skills. Network administration skills.
Right.
You're going to be a DBA. Your DBA skills.
So he says he just got a resume for somebody that said they wanted to be a DBA on the first line for a DBA job, and the second line said they want to be use networking skills, as in network administration, routers, switches, that kind of networking. That's true. I've always kept different copies of my resume, so I have a resume that's tailored kind of to me to be a manager, so it emphasizes the skills that I have as far as leading projects or managing people or something else. The same time periods and the same jobs, I might have a resume as a DBA that emphasizes more the technical skills that I've actually brought into play at my position. Don't get those confused. Don't send the wrong one to the wrong place. But it's a good idea to customize your resumes and cover letters as much as you can. Don't lie. Please don't lie. It's not going to help you. But shade and emphasize the things that are more important for different positions. Yes, sir? All right, so his question is, should I have different resumes for different companies? To a point. You don't want to... So everybody here has written code, I assume, right? Who wants to maintain 8 code bases for the same application? None of you. All right, don't do that. It's just too hard. So Typically, I don't know that I would customize a resume specifically for a company. Maybe if I really wanted a job, I would. But in general, I would have a couple of different resumes for the different positions that I'm willing to work at. Right? Don't just make 12 resumes. Right? Really think about the jobs that you want to take, and I might make 2 or 3 resumes for different jobs. So a DBA versus a developer, I might have 2 different resumes there. If you want to make one for Microsoft, that's fine. You know, get a Subversion or Git or Mercurial in place so that you can keep track of this. But I don't know if I do that. Yeah.
Personally, what I do is I try to maintain one big resume with all the work and all the stuff that I've ever done and never hoped to do and all these other good things. And then when I read the job description, I'll go in and I'll tailor that. Like say, for example, if I have networking and DBA experience and I'm applying for a DBA job, I take all the networking
Right.
and then throw in those for somebody else.
Right. So he says he maintains one kind of master resume, and then he will take things out to fit a particular position or a job answer. And that's not a bad idea at all. That really is kind of a CV then, where you've got just all this stuff you've ever done, and maybe you've got a lot of details. So for a particular job, say you worked at Microsoft and SQL Server, you might have a paragraph that explains your managerial or project lead responsibilities. You might have a paragraph that talks about your technical responsibilities or what you've actually solved, and then you kind of take that stuff out for different jobs. And you can do that, you have to do what works for you. I try not to make it too complicated because it's really easy to start making mistakes then. And the mistakes are worse than actually having that tailored resume. So I would really try to keep it down to just 2 or 3 resumes tops anytime. Yes, sir.
What I was looking at was, when you're having graphic online and you create a resume that is kind of different to it, the first thing I do is, when I get a resume, I don't look at the resume. I go on, I search for it, and then look at the resume. Does it match? If it doesn't match these lines, you're out.
So Roy's doing a SQL Saturday in Curacao. If anybody wants a vacation in February, go to Curacao. Roy. He says when he gets a resume, he looks online to see if what is posted online matches what's on the resume. And that's absolutely something that people are starting to do. And that's what a lot of HR companies do. And when they find inconsistencies, if they're large, they do reject the resumes. So that's why you say you don't want to lie. You want to be careful. And it's not so much what you post. The thing you always have to keep in mind, and I'll have an example, is somebody else might post something about you. You have to be really careful about being able to explain those discrepancies or being aware of them. Anybody else? All right, move on. So the kind of addition to the resume is becoming more important now is kind of your online profile. And to me, because your resume tends to be so short, 2 pages is not a lot of information, especially in these days where most of us will probably have a new job every 5 years. Having a place online where you can kind of keep track of what you've done, or at least a digital place, is kind of important. It doesn't necessarily have to be online. I actually have friends that do this, but they do it for their consulting businesses, and they do it only inside of their computer, and it's really their portfolio, like an artist portfolio. And when they go to clients or when they're trying to talk to clients, that's when they pull it out, or that's when they send it to somebody to showcase what they've done in the past. But they don't have it publicly available for everybody. So you can kind of do this privately if you want. But it's a good idea to keep all this stuff done. If you want to add this, have a 1-page resume, maybe you want to have a 1-page kind of profile that links out to say, here's where I've written an article, or here's where I've blogged about something, here's where I've described this project in detail that I worked on, or something else. You can include that as well. And it's a nice addition in the digital world, especially because so many people are doing things electronically. It's a great way to have yourself presented in a way that you can kind of control to a company or to a hiring manager. Now, I say give them one because they'll find one anyways. These days, it is fairly hard to stay off the internet, to not have some kind of digital presence. And people are successful at it, and if that's what you want, that's fine. But more and more, it seems like people want to share more, and it does start to look a little funny if you haven't shared anything at all, especially in this business. If you've never answered a question online, posted a question online, you've never talked about a project you've done, it starts a little bit funny when the whole rest of the people that apply have actually done something. So it may or may not hurt you, but it certainly doesn't help you become more of a standout or more likely to get something done. Again, be professional. If you want to keep a profile out there that talks about your SQL Server accomplishments, that's great. If you want to talk about how you can train cats to swim or something, it's not really appropriate to this business. Keep that separate. Keep it somewhere else. You're welcome to do it. You might be a great musician or photographer or something else. Put that stuff separate, though. Make sure you've got like a professional area for your professional work. Yes, sir.
So if I had my own web page with my online presence there, the way I'm envisioning it is I would have a section, by the way, MikeStewart.com is a salsa singer, so I don't know if they're trying to look for me.
All right. So you don't sing salsa, is that what you're saying? Okay. I would not do that. I would completely separate it out. And in all honesty, for a large extent for these profiles, I would probably use a service like LinkedIn or Plaxo or somewhere else and just make this my professional site. And it could link to your blog or something else, but if you've got stuff for your family, you keep it completely separate. Or some other side business or hobby or whatever else you do. Now, again, most of us aren't funny, remember that. Don't try to be too cute here, but when I was a young man, when I was coming out of college, I had a guy that was kind of a mentor, and he told me at the time, when you get ready to go into business and you go into the corporate world, before you publish anything, before you write a memo, back then we actually type memos on typewriters. Before you send an email, before you do anything else, you want to use a test. And he always called this the Washington Post test to me, because at the time the Washington Post was a really big, well-known newspaper. Now I'm not sure if it's even a newspaper anymore. I think not for long. But he's always told me, if what you wrote, if that memo appeared on the front page of the Washington Post tomorrow, would you have a problem with that? Would you be able to explain it to your boss or somebody else? That was a big test for me, and I kept that in mind before I write, publish, send something out. These days, the test for me is more the kid test, right? Can I explain what I wrote to my kids without a problem? And that sometimes stops me and makes me think about what I'm actually writing. I want to be able to justify that it makes sense. I have a defensible position that this actually fits. I'm not just upset. I'm not just saying something that's inappropriate or offensive or anything else. No. You have to use your own test. You have to decide what works for you. But I really encourage you to stop and think before you post things online. Ask your spouse. Ask your mom. Right? Your mom's a good test. For most of us, our parents are of a different generation, of not the digital world. And if they go, I'm not sure about that, it's worth rethinking it, right? Ask a third opinion then. If you ever have any doubt about something you're going to post, don't post it. If you have the slightest itch in the back of your mind that says don't do it, don't do it. Go ask somebody. All right? You can always post it later. We're not in the news business. None of us are in the news business, even me. Most of the stuff I write could be published tomorrow or 3 days from now or 2 weeks from now. So don't be in a hurry to write everything down. Be careful. I'm sure some of you see the tweets that roll through here sometimes during the keynotes and stuff. There's definitely some of those tweets I think should not be sent. There's people that are crossing lines, and if the wrong person sees that post, they could get themselves in trouble. You'd be really careful. All right? Doesn't mean you can't do it. Just if you have doubt, just wait. 10 minutes, an hour is not going to kill you. All right? Think about it before you post it. You can build one wherever you want. I mean, there's so many free services these days between Google and Microsoft and Yahoo and everybody competing. There's all these places that you can go and get a spot in the digital world. There's more and more privacy implications or settings that you can use to kind of decide who can see things. Encourage you to use them. You want to include contact information, but not identity information. About a decade ago, maybe 12 years ago, actually, I had my own website. I posted my resume online because at the time I was looking for jobs, and I wanted to be able to send somebody a link and say, go get my resume. And so what do you do when you post your resume, you write it in Word? What's the first thing you put in your resume? Name. What's the second thing? Address. So my wife saw it, and she called me up and said, I don't want my address on the Internet. And I never thought about it, but it was a big deal to her, and so I took it off. These days, I don't even include my phone number anymore because I don't need the phone number, right? These days, you can email me, and that's the best way to get a hold of me. Actually, as a matter of fact, most of my friends actually find me, I think, on Twitter. I think I get more messages on Twitter than I do in email from friends these days. But, don't include your identity information. These days, all of you should be able to have a separate email address that could follow you for the rest of your life, on Gmail or it's not Bing, Hotmail, wherever it is. Set that up. You can use that. Allow people a way to contact you, but it doesn't have to be something that uniquely identifies you in potential areas. And ask your family, right? If you live with your parents, ask your parents, your spouse, your kids. Make sure they're aware of what you're posting out there so that they're comfortable with it as well. And you should ask them what they're posting as well. Did you have a question? No? All right. Google Alerts, I assume Bing has something. I don't really use Bing, but if anybody knows. Google Alerts essentially allows you to write a search on Google and save it. And whenever it matches, they'll send you an email that says you had a match of this. I actually use this. It doesn't work great with Steve Jones, but Steve Jones SQL Server seems to work all right. And for those of you that have unique names, it probably works better. But it's a great way to see if something else is being posted about you or what else is appearing with you in it, because you never know what's going to be there. I encourage you to do that, especially if you're looking for jobs or post things. I have my profile ready. Like I know where it is so that if somebody calls me, I can send it out. I can't tell you how many times myself or friends of mine have been called about a job that isn't posted anywhere. And they say, if you can send me your resume today, I'll get it in front of the hiring manager. My wife's had 4 jobs in 15 years. She sent 1 resume out 15 years ago. Since then, she's been called by so many people that say, I've got a job, send me your resume, I'll put it in front of somebody tomorrow. Have that ready. The bigger your network is, the more people you know, the more likely that's to happen. These days, I see people getting jobs on Twitter and LinkedIn and everywhere else. But have that ready to go. And then update it quarterly. One of the things that I always recommend people is in your calendar of choice, whether it's Outlook or Google Calendar or whatever it is, set a reminder that repeats every 3 months. When that thing goes off, open up your resume or your CV, spend 30 seconds looking at it. If there's something to update, just update it right then and then close it down and save it. Keep it available. That way you're always up to date because you never know what's going to happen. If you open that thing up in 30 seconds and you've got nothing to change, it's not necessarily bad, but stop and think about that for a minute. Think about, have I not done anything worthy of noting in my career in 3 months? And then maybe not. Maybe you're continuing on a long project, same job, whatever. It's not a big deal. But you ought to think about that at least for a couple of minutes and go, maybe I should be trying to do something else that's worth updating my resume about. Always kind of move forward a little bit. Any questions? Who's doing all right? All right. So here's an example of something that was kind of eye-opening to me about 4 or 5 years ago. David Reed works at Microsoft. He's a good friend of mine, and he used to work in the SQL Server group, and now he's, I think, in the Xbox group or something. I don't know. But he posted this joke about me on his blog. It came up on MSDN, and I had no idea that it was going out there. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. He's just making a little bit of fun of me. But I had no idea this was coming out until somebody pointed it out to me. Some third person saw David's blog and said, hey, David wrote something about you. This could easily have been something malicious. It could have easily been, God, that Steve Jones is such a jerk, or, any number of things, right? I said something inappropriate, whatever happened. True or not, somebody could have posted this, and I have no control over that. The same thing goes for you. You've upset a coworker, you've fired somebody. Anything that happens, you never know what could be posted out there. This is a great reason for you to use Google Alerts or something else and try to keep track of what might be going on in your digital persona that you have nothing to do with. Not necessarily a problem, but you don't want to be ambushed on an interview, or you don't want somebody to potentially not call you because of something that's out there. If you find something like this, you could always make a note on your resume, and I might just do that said, by the way, this isn't me, or here's my explanation to this, if it's something that's really bad, that's blatantly untrue, because you may not be able to get it removed. The other thing is, stuff like this tends to fall off of any search if you post more about yourself. One of the ways that some of these companies actually improve reputations of people digitally is they start to overwhelm the search engine with good stuff, and so anything bad falls to page 3 or 4 or 5 of a Google search. How many people go past 2 pages when they search for something? Anybody? Few, but not often. Most of us, 1 or 2 pages and we're done, especially if we find something that looks relevant or appropriate on the first page. All right, so social networking. How many people here are on Twitter, out of curiosity? Wow, a lot of people. All right, how about Facebook? LinkedIn? All right, so almost everybody. So most people are in something. Some of you aren't. MySpace, Plaxo, there's any number of them overseas as well. There's nothing wrong with being on a social network, and I encourage you to try it if you want. What social networking is really no different than anything I've been doing for 25 years of my career, first offline and then online. It's just networking. It's getting to know people. Social networking gives us some more tools, allows us to proceed in kind of this real-world fashion. But the interactions I have on Twitter or LinkedIn or anywhere else with people are really no different than interactions I've had in person. They're not different than user group interactions for the most part. In Denver, we used to have an offline group called First Tuesday, where the first Tuesday of the month, all these technology people would get together for happy hour, essentially. And we do what we do on Twitter. You talk about things, ask people questions, get to know them. Social networking is a great way to kind of reinforce those offline relationships or build new relationships that you can reinforce offline. Roy and I met for the first time last year, but we've known each other for years, right, through Twitter and SQL Server Central. Same with Hugo. I met Hugo 4 or 5 years ago, I think, but we knew each other before that happened. My business partner, Andy Warren, who I started SQL Server Central with over a decade ago, we built that site, and we worked on it for 11 months before we ever met in person, before we ever shook hands. Built a completely virtual company. Wasn't social networking, but it was networking, and it was a relationship built in the digital world. These relationships can be just as powerful as online relationships. I'm sure we've all seen some of the craziness that sometimes can happen with Facebook or anything else, but these are really valuable things to do, and I highly encourage you to network. The more I progress in my career, the more I realize that networking is probably the single biggest, best way for me to find another job or to grow my career. I mean, it really is. You can't count on it. You can't be sure that somebody will help you, but it just seems to have more power than anything else. When I was growing up, this is how a lot of deals got done. Has anybody here ever implemented a piece of software at their company or at a client, and they thought, whoever purchased this software was an idiot, this was the worst decision ever? Do you know why they bought that software? This is why they bought that software. Because the guy that sold it played golf, or he took him to a concert, or did something else for the guy that wrote the check. Like it or not, it's just the way the world works. If you stop and think about it, a lot of things in our own lives happen because of people we know, not necessarily on the technical merits or the absolute merits of whatever it is. You know, we choose wine, we go out to dinner with somebody, we choose a date, we do any number of things based on social interactions, not on some strict piece of data. It's just reality. Networking is a great way to get to know other people. You have to be a little bit careful with it because as you're letting people know about you, potentially you're also letting your boss know about you or anybody else. So you just want to be aware, again, of what you're posting. You don't want to post necessarily, I hate my job and I'm going to quit as soon as I find something else, because you might find yourself quitting a little faster than you expected. So you have to be a little bit careful, but it is a great way to hear about opportunities. Every year, I have all kinds of friends that get jobs from different things. TJ Belt's a friend of mine from Utah. He actually got a new job this year by somebody finding his LinkedIn profile and the list of stuff that he had done and worked on and links back to his blog, and they called him and hired him. He got a new job. He wasn't looking for a job. Wendy Pastrick is a friend of mine from Chicago, and she posted last year that she got laid off on Twitter, and within a week, people on Twitter, friends, had found her a bunch of interviews for different jobs. It's absolutely amazing what can happen, and it's a great way to hear about what other people are doing as well. A few years ago, I was giving this presentation. Somebody said, an older gentleman said, all right, I signed up for LinkedIn, now what do I do? And I was a little bit stunned because, you know, I'm not that old, and I thought, well, you just do stuff, right? It's not hard. Actually, I had to stop and think about what you do. You know, just like when you walk into a room at the opening reception here, or you walk into a cocktail party or anything else, you want to spend a few minutes trying to figure out what's going on. You know, if you're new, if you're not part of that group, observe a little bit. Find out what other people are doing. Start to make a comment or ask a question. Find some way to interact with people. You know, start slow and build some bonds. Networking takes time. You certainly don't want to do it when you need a job. You want to do it before you need a job. But do any of these things where you can just try to interact with other people in that group and build your network within your circle of expertise or your geophysical area or whatever works for you. Build that up. I run this party every year on the opening night. I don't know, how many of you were there out of curiosity? Just a few. Every opening night at PASS, I have this huge party, and it's you know, it's kind of a fun thing. We do a casino catering thing where everybody comes and hangs out. You guys had a good time, right? Yeah. But it's really a networking thing. It's really a way for people just to get to meet each other. You know, people that might have met online, that you know, might have heard about each other or something. It's a good chance for them to talk about whatever. You know, talk about SQL Server, talk about things in the rest of your life. A lot of people come out of here with better relationships and bonds than they had when they walked in. And it's the kind of thing you should do. You should take advantage when you sit down at lunch today. sit down. If there's somebody you don't know, just introduce yourself. Hey, what do you do? Where do you work? What's going on? What do you do with SQL Server? Find some, commonality. If you're standing in line, just say hi to people, right? I mean, first of all, it's just polite, right? It's just a good thing to do. Second of all, you might make a new friend. You could always use another friend. Again, when you do social networking, avoid identity information. Be careful of that. There's problems. And then keep this stuff professional. If you've got a Facebook account and you want to use it for professional identity, that's fine. But if you've got one, where you're a musician or whatever, make that separate. Just make a second one. It's really not that hard to do. I have a separate website. My Facebook account, for the most part, is personal, not professional. I tend to put my professional stuff more on Twitter or on my blog or somewhere else. Separate those things out. You don't have to use your work email. I could just say, but use an email that you can monitor. One of the things most of these sites do is they'll allow you to get a daily, a weekly, a monthly email of changes or what's going on or something else. And those are good to look at just to see what's happening in your network and what's happening with people around you. But you want an email that you monitor. You don't want something that just goes into a dead end on Gmail you never check, because you never know when somebody might use that to get a hold of you and say, I've got a job. Yes? Right. So I started turning those down. She has a Facebook account, but she's getting professional friend requests on Facebook, and I've had that same problem. And my apologies in advance, but I'm not accepting Facebook. If you haven't met my kids or we haven't sat down and eaten dinner together, I'm not going to have you on Facebook. And it's nothing personal, but it's just that's a personal thing for me, right? I've got friends from high school. I've got my mom, my wife, my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, all those people. That's really what I put there. I post information about my kids or, all the craziness that happens out of my ranch or whatever. So I don't think there's anything wrong with turning it down. Just point people to your LinkedIn thing and just you can respond and say, do it. Or I just don't respond. And if somebody asks me, I say, just connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I'd professionally connect with you. So, yes. So he does a different approach. Facebook has this concept of groups. It's some people think it's hidden. I don't think it's very hidden. I think it's pretty obvious that Google Plus is the same thing, where you can you have your circle or your group, and whenever you post something, you can say, is it visible to everybody or just this group or something else. And that's what this gentleman does, is he decides what goes where. To me, that's kind of a pain. So for Facebook, I'm just like, if you're my friend on Facebook, you can see it, and if you're not, otherwise you're just on LinkedIn. Just don't worry about it. Yes. Get rid of them. You can contact them, right? Facebook makes it really to message them. Just send a note. Is anybody here Paul Randall's friend?
Yeah, exactly. Paul Randall said he's going to change it. Forgive me if I didn't.
So is anybody here that was Paul Randall's friend and is not Paul Randall's friend anymore? He posted a note. He said, next week, he goes, I'm just going to cut everybody on Facebook that I don't know personally. No offense. Come to SQLskills.com, come to LinkedIn.com/Paul Randall, but otherwise just do that. You can contact them and say, I'm closing this off for professional, work. Go to this link on LinkedIn or Plaxo or wherever else you're going to do it. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to manage your information. It's your life. It's your reputation. Most people will understand if you give them a reasonable explanation about why you're doing something. Right? We all make mistakes. We all do stupid things sometimes, but sometimes we have a good reason for doing something stupid. And if we go to our boss or our wife or our husband or whatever and say, this is why I did it, usually they're accepting and they're understanding of that. And the same thing, don't feel like you have to accept every request or that you're obligated in some way. If you want to maintain the professional relationships, just point them somewhere else and say, come get a hold of me here. Twitter you can't, right? It's a wide open thing, so be careful if you're on Twitter. Anybody else? All right. So let me move on to volunteering. Volunteering is, kind of what I'm doing, but it's what a lot of people are doing here this week. There's people in your local community that do that. There's people that do it outside of the technical area. Volunteering is a great way to show a number of things. First of all, it shows you care. And I encourage you to volunteer, but please don't volunteer if you don't want to volunteer. Don't do it for a resume bullet. Do it because you want to do it. Okay? You don't have to do any of these things. You can do them all, some of them. Do what works for you. But volunteering shows you that you think about more than yourself. It shows that you care a little bit, and it shows that you have some initiative, that you're willing to go do something that you don't have to do. Those are always very, very valuable skills at work. If I have to tell somebody to do every single thing they have to do, I'm going to fire them. I cannot stand that. I can't handle that. Right? I expect to say, go accomplish this, and then it's your job to figure out how to accomplish it and get it done, and hopefully get it done better and sooner and quicker than I expected. Right? Volunteering shows that. You can volunteer with PASS, your local user groups, any number of things in the technical area, and they're great things to do if you want to do it. But you don't feel like you're obligated. It's a time and place thing. I volunteer more some years, less other years. It just depends on how busy you are. And again, it's your life. Manage it appropriately. Stop and think about it, right? And do it when it's appropriate for you. You can do it at work, right? You can. Who here has a person at work that always asks you to do something like every week or every month or every quarter, and it drives you absolutely insane, or they're really annoying about it? Nobody? Is it just me? Everybody's really careful about that. I understand. Maybe your coworkers in the room, you don't want to say anything. That's happened to me many times. You know how I fix that? I take a day or a week or a month, or I buy somebody lunch, and I explain to them in excruciating detail and very simplistically how to do it themselves. Or I give them rights, or I build them an application to do it, or build them a report, and then I let them do it. Typically what that does is it keeps me sane. It frees up more time eventually. It's an investment in my life. And I've made a friend usually. Usually somebody's very happy if you can help them do things themselves. Take that time to do that, you know. It's a volunteering effort, and then make sure that you keep a record of what you've done, right? You don't have to stick it on your resume. You don't have to go, oh, I'm the greatest helper in the planet. But keep a record of it, We all have annual reviews. It's a great place to go, hey, I did these things, right? I saved this amount of time for my job, or I made it easier for this person to do this, and just let your boss know. Or have it ready in an interview. When you go into an interview, as a story of how you made the job better, how you did a better job, and you're an employee that's going to do more than you're asked to do. That's something managers love, right? You don't like asking people to do everything, do you? You want them to do it before you ask them. Forums are another great place to volunteer. Does anybody here participate in forums, answer questions? A few people. I've actually gotten the jobs because of this, because I've answered so many questions online. And it's great because a manager can then go through there and they go, oh, look at this. He actually knows how to restore a database to a point in time because he taught somebody else how to do it. Or he knows how to implement whatever. It's actually a great way. It's a great way to pay it forward. It's a great way to double-check yourself and force yourself to make sure you know it well if you're going to provide a good answer. Do provide good answers. Do some research. Make sure you're not posting bad information because that goes the other way. But it's a great way to stick that on your resume and say, hey, for me, I'm Steve Jones on SQL Server Central, and I've answered all these questions. And then somebody can kind of go check and say, all right, this is probably the kind of person. Shows how you think, shows how you work, shows what you know. You can build a project as well, SoundForge, CodePlex, whatever else, if you're so inclined. You could go work outside of your company. You could go to your local church, or the Boy Scouts, or Habitat for Humanity, or somebody else, and do something technical or non-technical. You could show other skills, show leadership skills, or show anything else that might prove that you do a little bit more than you're asked to do, or that you've got this desire to help other people. Those are things that stand out to other people. And again, don't volunteer if you don't want to. I mean, don't go do something with your church or some charity organization because you just want to stick on your resume. I think it's horrible. But if it fits you, if you've got the time and it speaks to you, go do it. And then at the appropriate time when you're trying to get a job or it comes up in an interview, talk about it. You never know who you might build a bond with because they say, I'm part of Habitat for Humanity, or I'm part of Scouts. I volunteer with the Scouts. And you build an instant bond there with the guy that might be hiring you. Well, I don't think it matters. Just a quick side note. If you're going to start a company, the name doesn't matter. It has absolutely no name. Apple's the dumbest name in the planet. Microsoft's not far behind, but they're hugely successful. If you do a good job, it doesn't matter. No. So they won't search. So Way Out West doesn't typically come up, but I'm Way Out West, by the way. But I put it on my resume. I actually have put my handle, because I've had Way Out West as a handle in forums, So Roy asked, what do you do for your handle or your name? You can use whatever. Use your name if you want to use your name. Use, keep it clean, keep it appropriate, right? It's a professional career. But you can use whatever you want to do, whatever speaks to you. I specifically didn't choose something SQL related because I didn't want to be tied into SQL Server. I mean, I like SQL Server, but somebody wants to pay me $200K to manage Oracle, I'm gone. I won't see you guys anymore, all right? It's that simple. I'm a pragmatist. Use whatever you want to and include it on your resume or CV, right? Let people know. Or your LinkedIn profile, whatever.
There should be some kind of dark area.
Yeah. So he asked, what about your picture? Again, keep it clean. I mean, I have fun with pictures, right? It's a little bit of who I am. And I recognize that it annoys some people that I change my picture on a regular basis. I'm willing to live with that, To be fair, there's a lot of people whose pictures they post on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and I meet them in person, and I'm like, I had no idea that was you, because I couldn't tell. I don't think the picture matters, Nothing offensive, yes.
What's the appropriate workplace etiquette for forums? Say I'm out there researching something, answer for myself, and I see a question, I feel obligated to take over.
So what's the workplace etiquette for doing something in forums? Ask your boss. First of all, it's just polite. Just ask permission. Say, I like to participate in forums. I like to answer questions. If I research something, A lot of bosses actually surprisingly understand it because they realize that it's a kind of a little bonus point for your company. Even if your company has nothing to do with like consulting, it's still a bonus point, but it also means you're learning more things. Some bosses hate it. If that case, don't do it, right? But just ask. It's that simple. I mean, it's just polite, right? Same thing at home. Ask your wife before you spend like 2 hours at night, right? And just ask. Communication goes a long way. All right. The flip side of answering questions on forum is asking questions. Who here has run into a problem at work they couldn't solve, they didn't know how to do? Hopefully everybody raised their hand, right? Happens to me all the time, okay? But a lot of people are afraid to ask a question or post something online. I've had so many people posting in SQL Server Central and then go, I have to delete that because my boss is going to fire me if he thinks I don't know it. Your boss is typically not going to fire you if he doesn't think you don't know it, unless you told him you knew it, and you don't. All right? So don't lie. It doesn't help you. But we all need help at times. We all have to, get assistance somewhere else, or we all have to learn things. When you post something online, especially if you post the question in an intelligent way, I'm having this problem, I tried this doesn't work, where can I go? It shows that you're making an effort, you know how to find help, you know how to research things. And then you can learn from it, right? You get some assistance, and then you go solve the problem. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, and that's really what you're doing posting questions. I post questions online. Hugo posts questions. He's the smartest guy in the room. We all do it. And it's useful in an interview, too, because there's times where people will ask you about adversity or when you've had problems or something else in the technical area, and this is a great way to actually prove that you know how to go solve something. It's easy to say, I Google it, but 300 other people are going to say, I Google it. You can say, hey, I researched the problem, I didn't understand this, I posted this question online. I got an answer, I had to go somewhere else to find it, I had to go find a script, I had to test it, I had to do any number of things. And if you can talk about that story in an interview or talk about it in your blog, which then becomes a bit of due diligence the manager can do, it's hugely powerful. It gives them tremendous confidence that you can actually do the job they're hiring you to do. It shows your resourcefulness. It absolutely does. And it's one more thing that makes you stand out from everybody else that just says, I want to Google it. Because, if that's the answer, then I just hire my 10-year-old because he can Google things really well. That's not the answer. Sorry?
It shows your time efficient, because at some point, continuing to look for it yourself may take 3 days.
Exactly.
Posing a question, spend the next hour doing something else useful, and then you go back to something else.
So Hugo says it can show that you're time efficient, and that's actually true. That's one of the things I've talked about before and I forgot. Thank you, Hugo. If you post a question, it allows you to get the answer faster. Has anybody worked with somebody else that you asked to do something, they didn't know how to do it, and they spent like 4 days just like spinning in a circle? That makes me insane. I'm like, just ask somebody. If we're all busy and none of us know, go post it online. Get the answer as quick as you can. Test it. Don't trust stuff posted online. It's not all true. Not even Wikipedia. Sorry, it's not true. test it, verify it, all that stuff, but it does show that you're efficient too, that you can actually get things done, or just someone said you're resourceful. All right. So leadership. I don't know about the rest of the world, but this country desperately needs leaders. Everywhere. I'm not just talking politics, but everywhere. You know, everybody needs leaders. Who here has had a who has a manager right now they think is a leader? So few. 20%. Yeah. I'm going to decline to answer the question because it's being recorded for future. There's no win in that answer for me, but I have had managers in the past that I thought were leaders. I've had managers in the past that I thought were not leaders, and it makes a huge difference. Leadership is really hard to define, but I read this book that talked about defining leadership in a great way, I think, and they said it's the ability to get people to do things they don't have to do. I thought that was a great definition, because it's easy to be a manager or the CEO and yell at somebody and say, do it, right? It's not really leadership. That's fear and obedience and any number of other things, but it's not leadership. Leadership is actually inspiring people. It's actually convincing them it's a good idea. It's getting them on your side. It's getting people to work together towards a common goal. And those are huge wins in this business. A lot of us as DBAs might work alone, but we also do have to work with other people. If you can convince the developers to use stored procedures and not write dynamic SQL constantly, it's a freaking huge win for security, for efficiency, any number of things. So if you can be a leader, that really stands out. I think almost every interview I've had, they always ask you, can you lead a team? Can you be a manager? Can you show some kind of leadership skill question thing? There's any number of ways you can do that, right? You don't have to be a manager, but if you want to, do that. Try not to lead by fear. Please try to lead by leadership, inspiration. But you can be a project leader, right? You can just get a team of people organized. You can just push bits around and make sure people are on task. There's any number of things you can do to try to show some amount of leadership, coordination, or even management skill. And those become really valuable in interviews to talk about, but they can make you stand out a little bit too. It shows that you're not just a person that's going to sit in a cube with headphones on and cut code all day. We need some of those people, but we often need people that interact well with others and, more importantly, convince other people to work with them. Too often, I think, we have the stereotype we actually convince people to not work with us pretty well. We want it the other way. Those are valuable skills to have. And it doesn't have to be in technology. Like I said, I volunteer with the Scouts, and that's a good leadership story to talk about because you're trying to convince people that are ignorant in the world, right? Kids that just haven't had the experience, but you're trying to convince them to do something or teach them something. That's a good leadership skill there. You can do the same thing with junior developers, interns, any number of other places that are coming along. If you do it at your church or anywhere else, please don't do it unless you really want to do it. But it's a great kind of story to keep in your back pocket and pull out when you need it, or to kind of add to your resume as an example of, here's how I show leadership. Any questions? I'm getting low on time, so I'm going to hurry a little bit. All right. Who has a technical blog? 8 of you, 9 of you. Who reads technical blogs? All right. This is typically what I see. This is probably, we're slightly skewed the other, more than 80% here. But most people don't have a technical blog. So if you have a technical blog, you stand out more than 90% of the people out there. When 100 resumes come in, that can become a huge difference. Yes? All right, so hold on for just a second because I'm going to talk about that. All right, so he's asking about, he's not a GWiz amazing blogger. I'm not either, by the way. This is what a blog is, all right? A blog is your voice. It's about what you know, okay? I don't care if you wrote today that you learned how to back up the transaction log and everybody else in this room has written about it, because when I interview you, I care that you know how to do it. I don't care that everybody else knows how to do it. This is about the things that you know. In my mind, the blogging thing is really about you. It's not a teaching platform. Now, it can be, and if you want to make it a teaching platform, please feel free to. If you want to make it your public presence, that's fine. You're welcome to do that. But for the average person, for most of us, The blog is really a great place to explain what you've accomplished in your career. You have a question? Yes. Proof it, ask somebody to look at it, all that good stuff as well. All this stuff, you want to do it well, and often that means just asking somebody for help or review or anything else. But this is really about you. It's easy. Don't overthink it, right? Tackle small things. Tackle the small things you learn, right? If you learned how to back up a database today, write it down. If you've learned how to connect to SQL Azure and upgrade a database, write that down. Some of the stuff will stand out and be amazing. Some of the stuff will be everyday things that you do. But it's important that, A, you know how to do it. A blog helps you explain that. For those of you that write blogs, you probably realize it helps you to learn better when you put it down on paper. And it also allows somebody else to learn what you know. And don't worry about what anybody else wrote. One of the best things I ever learned from my business partner, Andy Warren, is play your own game. Do your thing. Don't worry about what everybody else does. All right? You got to live your life and build your career. Don't try to compare yourself to everybody else. It's a losing game because there's always somebody better. I mean, it's just a losing game. All right? Do what you do well. Over time, this becomes a great long-term chronicle of your career. If you use things like tags or categories, over time you can go back and look at it, and you learn some things about yourself. You learn what you're interested in. You learn what you're working on. You might learn that you're doing a lot of stuff that you really don't want to do. That's an interesting thing to think about. If you go back and look at what you've written a lot about and what you're actually asked to do on a daily basis, you may find that they don't match. Maybe one thing is more important to you. Maybe you should look for a job in BI because that's what you always write about, and you're a core DBA that works on the engine. Maybe you find that they match perfectly and you're in the best job in the world, like I am. Sorry, I have the best job in the world. Good luck to the rest of you. Keep it professional. I don't want to hear about your new song that you wrote or your cat's figured out how to get out of the house or whatever else. Put that on a separate blog. I have a website for me personally that's really for my mom because she lives on the other side of the country and she wants to know what the kids are doing. It's totally about me and my family. It has nothing to do with my career. I have a separate blog completely that appears on SQL Server Central and stuff, and that's only stuff, for the most part, that deals with my career. I know I'm slightly hypocritical. I write about the ranch and all kinds of weird things I do, but I do try to relate it to my professional career in the most part, right? When I have stories that are applicable to my career, I put them there. You guys don't want to hear my kid made, the next rank in Boy Scouts, whatever. I put that somewhere else. A few examples. Here's a great one that appeared at SQL Server Central from David Levy. It's very short. There's not a lot on there, but he goes in there and says, look, I read this. I was trying to have this problem. I went to Paul Randall's blog or Kim Tripp's blog or whatever. I found a solution, wrote about it, right? Really short and easy. Probably takes like 15 minutes to write. Here's one that's slightly longer. Paul Randall actually wrote, and it's not some gee whiz bang amazing thing, right? He read somebody else's blog, and he put something on there, and he said, I was trying to explain this thing. Andy Leonard wrote this series here, which I think is a little bit long. If you go through this, it's kind of the de facto explanation of the SSIS expression language because the MSDN version is very good. But this was actually like 20 pages, and I said, this was a little bit too long. This is really, he's trying to teach something and document something. This is something you want to publish somewhere else, but it's well written at least. Bill Vaughn lives up here, and Bill's a nice guy. I like Bill. But during the last presidential election in the U.S., he started to mix politics with his blog. And I totally don't care if you're a red state or blue state, green state, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. It has no relevance at all to work. So it doesn't need to be on your blog for your professional, career. If you want to volunteer for, Perry or Obama or whoever, you're welcome to do that, but keep it separate. The reason you don't put it on your blog is because when a hiring manager sees this, they have to start wondering, are you going to come into work and start advocating something, right? Which you don't need. You just don't need that at work. The other thing is, if you're a red state or blue state, you just cut your job search in half. for no reason. You gain nothing by it. Now, if this is on your Facebook page or some other blog and they find it, you can say, that's my personal life. I have, it's something I do outside of work. It's not part of work. It's completely separate. And you show, I have a separate blog. It's a separate place where I talk about things. So you're welcome to talk about and believe and do whatever you want it is. I'm all for that. But for your career, for your professional blog, keep it separate. By the way, I told Bill this was a bad idea. I don't think he agreed with me. Mike Walsh in New Hampshire puts Christian stuff on his blog. He's an independent consultant. He wants to work with people that are Christian for the most part. He is well aware that this turns off, the Muslims and the Jewish people, and right? It separates out his career, but he's okay with that, right? The important thing is he's aware of it. He knows that this is limiting his audience. He's totally fine with that. You can do the same thing if you want to, be a red state or blue state on your blog. Just be aware when you need a job, you might not have as many jobs as you want. Brian Kelly is a good friend of mine in South Carolina. He has a completely separate blog. Actually, Brian has like 3 or 4 blogs. He's a minister in a church group, but that stuff never appears on his professional blog on SQL Server Central. He has a separate blog where he puts that stuff out there. And I would encourage you to go look at it, not because you should believe it, but because it shows a nice little separation. So he's got a blog on SQL Server Central. He's got a separate one. You can kind of see that the posts, sometimes they're on both because they're appropriate, but a lot of times they're completely separate. Well, here's an example. So he's got this one and this one. They're separate. So how do you blog? Same way you do with forms or anything else, get permission. Just ask. It's just common courtesy. Across 8 or 9 jobs, I've never had a boss that had a huge problem with it. Thomas LaRock, who's on the board of PASS, his company told him he could blog, but he just couldn't use the name of the company anywhere else on his blog. He couldn't talk about being employed by them. Most companies might have something like that, but just ask. It's just easy to find out. Usually they don't have any problem. The blogging policy at Microsoft early on was just be smart. That was the policy. Be smart. Don't do anything stupid. Again, use the test. If you have any doubt, just don't do it. Just go ask somebody. Show your boss the blog and say, can I publish this or is this bad? It's that simple. One of the things I think you want to do, though, is be consistent. I see a lot of people start blogs and drop blogs. So what I recommend to all of you is set a reminder to spend 15 minutes a week writing something down. First of all, it's just good communication skill practice, right? We all probably write more emails than we do code. So spend 15 minutes. Write 10 posts, right? They don't have to be long, but write 10 posts and don't publish them. Then figure out how long it took you to write 10 posts. And then just schedule them out. Because if you learned how to create an SSIS or SSAS cube today, it's not news. It doesn't matter if you publish it tomorrow or 6 weeks from now. Just schedule that stuff out and, at the pace that works for you. If you're going to blog, if that's something that you want to try to do, I would encourage you to blog at least like once a month, or every 2 weeks. So try to find this pace you can maintain, because a lot of hiring managers will find you on Google or they'll look it up from your resume or whatever, and they'll really only look through 5 or 10 posts, not a lot. So you want them to look like they're a little consistent, because if they're not, if you blogged 6 times last month and once this month and you don't blog for 4 months, I don't know what happened. Maybe you got busy, maybe you got tired of it, maybe you couldn't think of anything else to blog. Any number of reasons, none of them good. All right? If you're going to disappear for a while because you're busy, just put a note in your blog. I'm busy for the next 4 months. I'm helping Obama get reelected, or I'm saving the world, or whatever you're doing. Just put that on there. Don't copy anybody's posts. Don't copy anybody else's posts. Please don't copy anybody else's posts. All right? If I said it 3 times, it's true. So don't do it. Yes.
Sorry, I was writing when you made a good part of that last slide. You're recommending every 2 weeks or just a regular schedule, whatever that regular schedule?
Yeah, whatever it is. Don't try to blog. If you've never blogged, please don't try to blog every day because you're going to fail. Taking me a long time to learn how to write every day, okay? Whatever your schedule is, just pick a schedule. I try to do at least once a month. If you do 15 minutes a week, that's an hour a month. You ought to be able to create a post a month out of that. And just don't overthink it. Don't make it anything you figure out. I guarantee you, there's 1,000 people in the world that are coming into the SQL Server this month that don't know how to do it. So don't worry about it. Just write something down. Don't copy posts. All right, just don't do it. Okay, there's no reason to do it. Okay, whatever your reason is, none of them are good. You don't know it. You don't understand it. Anything you do, it's plagiarism, it's copyright violation, and it just makes you look bad. So just don't do it. If you use somebody else's blogs, just drop a note. I do it all the time. I learned something from Hugo. I say, Hugo's blog taught me this, and this is what I think it is, or this is how I tested it, or whatever else. Just include, it's common courtesy, first of all, just to include a reference. And then it shows that you went out and actually made an effort to improve your career. You did something more than just sit in the queue, wait for somebody to tell you what to do. You can do it anywhere you want. Like I said, I have a good friend in Boulder who's a consultant that actually does this in Word. And he never publishes anything. But he has, 400 or 500 pages of stuff that he's done over the years for different clients. And when he walks into a client and they go, we got to build X. He's like, I did something similar to that. And he pulls it out, shows it on his laptop, and shows, hey, this is what I did. And it closes a lot of business for him. I mean, he's got a huge pile of stuff that is never publicly released. He only shows it sections to clients. You can use LiveWriter. It's great. It's the only thing for blogging Microsoft's ever done that was any good. If anybody at Microsoft's in the room, sorry, but it's just true. But LiveWriter is a great way to write offline, save drafts. It saves it in a folder. You know, you could just do that for yourself if you don't want to publish on the internet. And don't feel you have to publish on the internet. Just do it. Maybe include one with your resume. Here's a sample thing I did that I thought was really good. I learned something. Yes, sir. Yeah, so he writes in Word. As this gentleman said as well, spell check it. Learn to write well. Because if you can't write well, it looks bad, and people are going to think you're going to do that in email and everything else. You know, so spell check it, grammar check it, give it to your spouse. I mean, even if your spouse knows nothing about SQL Server, they can at least read it and go, it makes sense. You know, it flows from A to B to C. You know, there's no obvious grammatical errors or whatever else. Get a friend to look at it. Any number of things you can do there. Any questions on blogging? I think I'm done. But real quick, the step above blogging is really authoring and publishing, and this is where you're trying to teach somebody else something. This is the gee whiz bang teaching. This is not writing about you. So you have to make it a little more formal. There's any number of places that you can do this. You know, and then a book is then a step beyond that. Please don't start with the book. Books are hard, long, difficult projects. Best thing about writing a book is you give a copy to your mom after that. It's totally not worth it. It's just not. It's a horrible grind, but it is cool to give a copy to your mom. If you want to tackle it, there's any number of ways you can do this. A lot of authors multiple authors are doing a book these days. Speaking, y'all can all speak. I know I said that incorrectly, but you guys can all speak. Speak at the user group. You can come up here and do this. Not that hard. Nobody's going to throw anything. Nobody's yelled at me. There's always somebody smarter in the room. Hugo's smarter than me. I know that. Understand that. Just get over it. You guys can all share stuff, and I encourage you, if you want to try it, to just do it. Right? You don't have to, but it's a great thing that makes you stand out. I've had people comment on my speaking on my resume as well. Last thing, document stuff. Document the stuff you do. Keep track of it. Okay. Does anybody know who this is out of curiosity? I know it's not good. It's actually Steve Jones. But it's not this Steve Jones. That's the Sex Pistols Steve Jones. You know, there's about 8 famous Steve Joneses, of which I'm not one. But you want to let people know who you are and be able to talk about who you are and maybe who you are not. You know, accept your mistakes, learn from them, grow from them, be able to talk about them. But document the things that you have done. Have them ready for your review. If nothing else, I can't tell you how many times people have come into an annual review with no idea what they did for the past year. And as a manager, I can tell you, I usually have no idea what you did either. I mean, I roughly know, but specifically, across a year, I just don't know. Especially if I have 10 people working for me. And what happens when that happens? You get the 2% raise. You get the COLA. You don't get the 5% raise or the 10% raise or anything else. When you go in for the annual review, you go to job interview, that's the time to talk about your accomplishments. Just keep track of them. Right? It's not that hard. Blog is a great way to do that, but just keep track of them somewhere. Recruiters are great. Use recruiters if you need a job. That's all I'll say there. And then last thing, those of you who read my stuff know balance is really important, right? You get one life. You get 100 years. Most of us are near the halfway point or beyond it, okay? It's your life. Don't spend it working, all right? You got to work, but we work to live, right? We don't live to work. And so keep that in mind. Don't go crazy doing all this stuff. Find a balance in your life, a balance with your spouse and your family. Make sure you enjoy your life. You know, life's too short to take a crappy job. Find a job that fits you. That's it. There's some links and stuff in there. Touch your resume every quarter, please. You'd be surprised. It doesn't take much time. It can make a huge difference for you. And then you can win a thing with the evaluation. Stick them on the table over there, I think is correct. And then have a great time at PASS. Hopefully you guys learned something. And good luck.